Imagine standing in an ancient marketplace, hearing the voices of merchants, soldiers, and travelers echo off the stone walls. None of them knew their words might carry forward through history, yet some of those voices preserved in scrolls, inscriptions, and official records may hold clues to one of the most pivotal lives ever lived. Today, we're going to uncover evidence not from religious texts, but from the pens of historians, the chisel of a stonemason, and the buried treasures of archaeology. This is a journey across centuries and cultures, connecting dots between the past and the present. Stay with me, because by the end, you may see that the story you thought you knew is bigger, richer, and more historically grounded than you ever imagined. Roman historical accounts provide some of the most compelling non-religious evidence for the existence and influence of the figure at the center of early Christianity. Among the most cited is the work of the Roman historian Tacitus, who wrote in the early 2nd century. In his Annals, Tacitus describes events during the reign of Emperor Nero, particularly the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. While explaining Nero's decision to blame a specific group for the disaster, Tacitus makes reference to the founder of that movement, noting that he was executed during the rule of Pontius Pilate in the province of Judea. This reference is significant because Tacitus was not a Christian, nor was he writing with the intent to promote the faith. He was a Roman senator and historian known for his skepticism and often critical tone toward various groups. His inclusion of this detail, therefore, serves as an independent attestation from a high-ranking Roman official who had access to imperial records. Another Roman historian, Suetonius, in his work The 12 Caesars, also mentions disturbances in Rome linked to followers of this figure, using the term Chrestus, a common variation of the name. While Suetonius' reference is brief and open to interpretation, it is still noteworthy as it points to tensions and social unrest attributed to this movement within the Roman capital itself. These accounts confirm several important points. The individual in question lived during the reign of Tiberius, was executed by Roman authority in Judea, and had followers whose activities were significant enough to be recorded in the historical writings of Rome. Furthermore, the tone of these Roman sources is hostile rather than supportive, which strengthens their credibility from a historical standpoint. They were not written to persuade others to believe, but to document events that had an impact on the empire. This makes such references valuable to historians, as they offer corroboration from outside religious texts. When read in conjunction with other records from the period, they help establish a timeline, geopolitical context, and the broader societal reactions to the early Christian movement. These Roman historians inadvertently preserved critical information that aligns with other historical frameworks, reinforcing the conclusion that the movement's founder was a real person whose life and death left an imprint even on the official record. Keepers of the world's most powerful empire at the time, Jewish historical sources, particularly the works of the 1st century historian Flavius Josephus, provide another important layer of evidence for the life and influence of the figure central to early Christianity. Josephus, a Jewish priest and scholar who lived through the Roman-Jewish wars, wrote extensively about Jewish history, culture, and politics. In his monumental work Antiquities of the Jews, there are 2 passages that refer to this individual. The first and more debated passage, often called the Testimonium Flavianum, describes him as a wise man, a doer of remarkable works, a teacher, and someone who attracted both Jewish and Gentile followers. It also notes his execution under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius, and mentions claims of his resurrection, along with the continuation of his movement. While many scholars believe later Christian copyists may have embellished certain parts of this text, the majority agree that there was an original core statement from Josephus that confirmed his existence and death. The second reference, less disputed, occurs in Book 20 of Antiquities and mentions James, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. In the context of James's execution in Jerusalem, this brief yet straightforward remark is significant because it places the name Jesus in a historical, political, and familial setting without theological commentary, suggesting authenticity. Josephus wrote for a Roman audience and was not promoting Christian beliefs, which makes his mentions all the more valuable as neutral, incidental confirmations. These passages also fit within Josephus's broader narrative about Judea's complex, religious and political tensions under Roman rule. The fact that this figure and his followers are noted among other key historical players of the era shows that his movement had already grown influential enough to merit inclusion in a work intended to explain Jewish history to the wider Greco-Roman world. Moreover, Josephus's accounts offer insights into the surrounding context of the movement's emergence, such as the political unrest, the role of the priesthood, and the frequent clashes between different sects. Taken together, these Jewish historical references complement the Roman sources, providing another independent testimony from a culturally and religiously distinct perspective. They serve as a bridge between Jewish and Roman records, confirming that the life, death, and following of this figure were recognized and documented in multiple traditions. Even among those with no religious incentive to preserve the story, early non-Christian references from Roman historians and officials further strengthened the historical basis for the existence of this central figure in Christianity, independent of theological claims. Tacitus, one of Rome's most respected historians, wrote in his annals around 116 CE about the persecution of Christians under Emperor Nero following the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. In explaining the origins of this group, Tacitus identifies Christus, who suffered the extreme penalty crucifixion during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pontius Pilate. Tacitus's account is especially valuable because he was openly hostile toward Christians, describing their beliefs as a pernicious superstition. This dismissive tone demonstrates that his reference was not an attempt to promote Christian doctrine, but rather a matter of fact inclusion based on historical knowledge. Similarly, the Roman governor Pliny the Younger, in a letter to Emperor Trajan around 112 CE, described Christians as meeting regularly to worship Christ as a god, swearing to live morally and refusing to worship Roman idols. This correspondence reveals that the movement was already organized, disciplined, and resilient despite legal pressures, and it confirms that devotion to Christ was central to their identity. Another Roman source, the historian Suetonius, mentioned disturbances among Jews in Rome during the reign of Claudius, possibly linked to disputes over Christus, a term that may refer to Christ. While brief and somewhat ambiguous, such references show that the presence and activities of early Christians were noted within the Roman administrative and political context. These Roman accounts are significant because they come from individuals who had no religious motivation to record these events, and in most cases were skeptical or antagonistic toward the movement. Their works were focused on governance, politics, and historical record keeping, yet they still found it necessary to mention this figure and the growing sect that followed him. Collectively, these testimonies demonstrate that by the 1st and early 2nd centuries, the life and death of this person, as well as the rapid spread of his teachings, were recognized facts among the Roman elite. They also confirm details found in other independent sources, such as the crucifixion under Pilate and the distinctive religious practices of his followers, reinforcing that the roots of Christianity were deeply embedded in the historical realities of the Roman world rather than being later. Inventions, archaeological discoveries have added a tangible, physical dimension to the discussion about the historical existence of this figure, offering evidence that complements and corroborates written sources from antiquity. While archaeology cannot directly prove personal details or divine claims, it can illuminate the cultural, political, and religious environment in which he lived, as well as confirm the authenticity of key figures, locations, and events described in historical records. Excavations in Jerusalem and surrounding areas have uncovered remains from the 1st century period, including streets, buildings, and marketplaces that align with descriptions found in both Roman and Jewish historical writings. One of the most striking finds is the ossuary of Caiaphas, the Jewish high priest who, according to multiple sources, played a role in the trial of this figure. The ornate limestone box, inscribed with the name Joseph, son of Caiaphas, provides a direct archaeological link to a person recorded in historical texts. Similarly, the discovery of a stone inscription bearing the name Pontius Pilate in Caesarea Maritima offers concrete evidence of the Roman prefect's existence and position during the same time frame, confirming details from Roman accounts. Artifacts such as coins, pottery, and inscriptions help establish the socioeconomic conditions, governance structures, and religious practices of Judea in the early 1st century. Additionally, excavations at sites like Capernaum and Nazareth reveal details of small town life in Galilee, giving context to how a movement could arise in such settings and spread across the Roman world. Inscriptions mentioning synagogues, burial practices consistent with Jewish law, and ritual baths all paint a vivid picture of the cultural and religious atmosphere. Even the architectural remains of Herod's temple complex match the descriptions given by ancient writers, demonstrating the historical accuracy of the backdrop against which this movement began. These findings do not stand in isolation. When paired with textual evidence, they strengthen the case that the key political, religious, and social elements described in non-Christian and Christian records were grounded in historical reality. By anchoring the narrative in physical, verifiable remains, archaeology helps transform ancient accounts from mere words on a page into a story set in a concrete, identifiable world where the people, places, and events described actually existed and interacted within the broader framework of Roman-ruled Judea. Manuscript analysis plays a vital role in evaluating evidence for this figure outside of religious texts, as it allows historians to examine the authenticity, origin, and reliability of ancient documents that reference him. By comparing various copies of the same work across centuries, scholars can determine whether key passages are original to the author or later insertions influenced by theological motives. In the case of Roman and Jewish historians such as Josephus and Tacitus, multiple manuscript traditions have been preserved, copied, and transmitted through different scribes and cultures, offering a window into how their accounts evolved over time. Experts use paleography, the study of ancient handwriting, along with textual criticism to date manuscripts, identify copyist errors, and trace the lineage of specific texts. For example, the writings of Josephus exist in Greek, Latin, and Arabic versions, and by studying differences between them, historians can discern which portions were likely written by Josephus himself, and which may have been added by later Christian editors. Similarly, the earliest surviving copies of Tacitus' Annals date from the Middle Ages, yet by examining the style, vocabulary, and historical consistency of his reference to this figure's execution under Pontius Pilate, scholars conclude that the passage aligns with Tacitus' authentic writing and Roman record-keeping practices. This type of work requires meticulous attention to details such as ink composition, parchment preparation, and marginal notes made by scribes, all of which can reveal the history of a manuscript's use and alteration. Manuscript analysis also involves cross-referencing with other contemporary works, inscriptions, and archaeological evidence to test the accuracy of place names, official titles, and chronological details. Even subtle variations between manuscripts, such as a shift in wording or the omission of a name, can carry significant implications for historical interpretation. Beyond verifying authenticity, this discipline helps establish the chain of custody for ancient texts, showing how they were preserved and valued across different cultures and time periods. By carefully sifting through these manuscripts, historians can separate later theological embellishment from the core historical references that connect to other independent sources, thereby producing a more reliable picture of events. This process ultimately bridges the gap between ancient historical writings and modern scholarship, grounding discussions about this figure in a disciplined, evidence-based based approach rather than relying solely on faith traditions or unverified claims. Archaeological support for historical accounts offers a tangible dimension to the study of this figure's life and era, providing physical evidence that can corroborate or contextualize written records. Excavations in the regions where these events are said to have occurred have uncovered artifacts, inscriptions, and architectural remains that align with descriptions from ancient historians. For instance, the discovery of the Pilate stone in Caesarea Maritima, bearing the name of Pontius Pilate, confirmed the historical existence of the Roman governor mentioned in multiple sources, including those outside of religious texts. Such findings validate the political and administrative framework described in the writings of Josephus and Tacitus, giving credence to their accounts. Coins minted during the reigns of Herod the Great and his successors further illustrate the socio-political climate, providing precise dating and insight into the rulers who intersected with the life events recorded. Urban archaeology in Jerusalem has revealed streets, marketplaces, and structures from the early 1st century, offering a realistic backdrop to the historical narratives. Inscriptions in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek have been found in synagogues and public buildings, reflecting the multilingual environment of the time. Even seemingly minor finds, like ossuaries with inscribed names, contribute to understanding the cultural and religious practices that shape daily life and governance. Archaeology also plays a key role in evaluating disputed locations, such as sites identified with trials, executions, or burial grounds. By examining stratigraphy, artifact distribution, and dating methods like radiocarbon analysis. This scientific approach allows researchers to either strengthen or question traditional identifications. Material evidence often acts as an anchor for written testimonies, reducing the reliance on interpretation alone and rooting historical discussion in verifiable data. It also sheds light on broader historical patterns such as Roman occupation methods, Jewish resistance movements, and economic exchanges in the Eastern Mediterranean. When archaeological data aligns with independent written accounts, it creates a powerful convergence of evidence that supports the plausibility of recorded events. Conversely, when the material record contradicts certain claims, it prompts re-examination of long-held assumptions, encouraging a more accurate reconstruction of history. The combination of archaeological discoveries with textual analysis not only deepens understanding of the era, but also reinforces the credibility of key historical references found outside religious sources, enabling a more nuanced and substantiated view of this figure's existence and the world in which he lived. In conclusion, when we step beyond the boundaries of sacred texts and look to independent historical writings, archaeological discoveries, and cultural context, we find a compelling body of evidence that points toward the reality of a remarkable life lived in the crucible of 1st century history. These external sources, whether penned by Roman historians, Jewish scholars, or revealed through stone, coin, and inscription, serve as independent witnesses to events and people long past. They do not replace faith, but they do strengthen the bridge between belief and history, showing that this story is not merely confined to religious tradition, but is woven into the very fabric of human record. It is a reminder that truth has a way of leaving its fingerprints on time, and when we look closely, those prints are still there for us to see. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the pages of history and the soil of archaeology. May your search for truth continue to inspire you, challenge you, and deepen your understanding of the world. Good luck in all your own explorations of knowledge, and as always, thank you for listening.